In 1977, director George Lucas changed the face of the film industry forever by bringing us a sci-fi classic that we will never forget.
In 2019, Beam Suntory gives us a high rye whiskey that they call the Granddaddy of Bourbon.
The movie is Star Wars.
The whiskey is Old Granddad.
And we'll review them both. This is
the Film and Whiskey Podcast. Welcome to the Film and Whiskey Podcast, where each week we review a classic movie and a glass of whiskey. I'm Bob Book.
I'm Brad G.
This week we are looking at the 1977 film, Star Wars. And we are not looking at Episode 4,
A New Hope.
Forget that, George Lucas. Your movie was called Star Wars.
And it's still called Star Wars.
We're talking about it's called Star Wars.
You sounded like Family Guy Peter. The Star Wars.
It's called Star Wars.
I'm John Wayne.
Well, hey there, Pilgrim. So what were you going to say?
This is my wheelhouse. We've watched a lot of movies. I've seen probably 15 to 20% of them before I watch them for the podcast. Mm-hmm. We're in my country now.
We are.
Bubba.
We're talking about Star Wars, and I'll out myself here. I did not grow up in a house where Star Wars was like a big thing. You know, my parents obviously saw Star Wars. It was the highest grossing film of all time for a while. They liked Star Wars. They were on board, you know, but I didn't grow up this obsessive Star Wars fan like some people did.
The same could be said for me. My parents, one of their first dates was actually going to see Star Wars in theaters.
Sure.
So my parents liked Star Wars, but in general, I wouldn't call my parents fanboys. They're not crazy about certain things. Like, I have certain friends whose parents are obsessed with Star Wars.
Right.
You know, that truly defined a generation of moviegoers. And I'm not saying that in a bad way, whether you were a fanboy or not of it. I'm just saying that I didn't grow up in a house that was obsessed with Star Wars, like you just said.
Yeah, sure.
But there's something about Star Wars to me that, especially the original trilogy and especially the original film, the only word that can describe it is magical. There is something so beautiful about these movies that there is a reason they have not only stood the test of time, but still could be considered some of the most popular movies of all time.
Sure.
And so I look back on these films and I am so excited to get into Star Wars because this truly is up at the top of my favorite films of all time.
This one, too.
This specific
one.
Yeah.
I'll say this about Star Wars. I can never put myself back in 77, right? I wasn't born then.
Yeah.
I know enough about film history to know the way that this changed film history, to know enough about how it changed the course of sci-fi history.
You would not have the Avengers if you didn't have Star Wars.
Absolutely. And I get that. So I have to evaluate it somewhat objectively, right? And the thing that I'm noticing when I watch, especially this first Star Wars film, is that when George Lucas is both writer and director, I think the movies suffer for it.
Yeah.
I think we can both agree that we think the best Star Wars film is The Empire Strikes Back. And that's pretty universally accepted now.
Yeah, Kershner was brilliant with Empire Strikes Back.
What they had to do with Empire is fill in all of the gaps that New Hope, or Star Wars introduced. And when I watch back Star Wars, having seen 8,
7 other main ones,
and then 2 periphery ones,
right?
There's been so much development of mythology over the years. You and I were even talking off air about TIE fighters.
Yeah.
This movie has TIE fighters in it, and they don't talk about what a TIE fighter is. These are things that fans went off and created mythologies about, and then Lucas decided to develop them 20 years later. And I feel like we read what we know now about Star Wars back into the original. And the fact is, the original film, the script has just some glaringly huge plot holes and flaws in character development. And we don't know very much about any of these characters, even at the end of the movie.
But,
So here's what we're
I'm
gonna do.
already angry.
I'm gonna ring the bell, and we can get into our first boxing match. Here's what we're gonna do today. We usually go through a list of categories. We talk about acting, we talk about direction, right? We're not gonna do any of that. What can we talk about with Star Wars that hasn't been talked about already? Everyone knows what Star Wars is. Instead, I'm coming at it from the perspective of a guy who likes this movie, but doesn't think it's perfect, versus Brad, who worships at the altar of Star Wars.
See, there's so many preconceived notions about who you are. The moment that I say I don't like the Disney Star Wars, people will put me into a box.
Sure.
Oh, he's just the old guy.
Well, so here's what I want to do. Here's what's off limits.
Okay.
We cannot dip into prequels, sequels, or any other Star Wars mythology when talking about this. We have to take this movie on its. If we were reviewing it the day after it came out in '77, this is all we have to talk about.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm saying. We can't use other movies to make this movie better.
Okay, well, let's get into the fact that you are so wrong about the plot holes and character development. Because you don't need it. This movie is so well streamlined that you get exactly what you need to move the story forward, to draw you into who the characters are, and to push you towards the final conclusion of the movie.
All right, here's what I want to do. Let's go through it from the beginning, right? This movie opens up with a small vessel getting chased by a big, what they call a Star Destroyer, right?
A small vessel being chased by a big vessel.
A large vessel. And you get this awesome perspective shot of like, oh, this spaceship went by and that's a big spaceship. And then the one Vader's on comes creeping in. And you're like, oh my gosh.
That is huge.
First glaringly obvious flaw. You learn how bad the Empire is at shooting right off the bat. I mean, how can they not shoot down this ship with Princess Leia in it?
They do, though.
They don't. They swallow it up into their ship.
That was the whole...
But they were shooting lasers at it, and they missed.
No, they didn't.
They missed the whole thing.
Literally in the opening scene, you see C-3PO and R2-D2 walking down the hallway.
Oh, that's right.
And they're getting rocked back and forth because they're not missing.
That's fair. Okay, fair point.
Know your movie, Bob.
1 point, Brad. I don't care enough is the thing, Brad. I don't care. All right, so 3PO and R2-D2 are the first characters we really meet in this movie.
Yes.
Which, in my opinion, my expert opinion, Brad, is a flaw to begin with, because 3PO and R2-D2 are not... Just listen, I don't dislike them, but they're not human characters. And not only are they the first characters we meet, essentially, they're the only characters we spend the first 25 minutes. I mean, we see Vader, we see Princess Leia come in and be kind of sassy for a second, and then get booted out, right? She gets put in detention.
All right, so your point is...
Hold on, I need to finish.
Okay.
I just think it's a flaw to have two droids, robots, be the first characters you meet. And then, because R2-D2 doesn't actually use real dialogue, everything's interpreted through C-3PO. And I like C-3PO, okay? And, like, we're not going to pull in characters from other movies, but, like, he's not a Jar Jar. He's not that annoying. But after 25 minutes in a row where it's just 3PO complaining about stuff, I was ready to get the show on the road. After they crash land and they have to go try to find Obi-Wan, like, I was so ready to get other human characters introduced into this movie.
Everything you just said is wrong.
Why?
Because one of the most beautiful parts about the movie is that it can help you and make you fall in love with with characters who are not humans. And what better way to do that than to start with two robots, one of whom doesn't even speak English. Literally, the way that R2-D2 communicates is one of the most endearing characters ever created in movies.
Fun fact, we were watching this movie the other night, my wife and I, and we put the subtitles on. I always watch stuff with subtitles just so I don't miss anything. And they subtitle all of R2-D2's dialogue, but not like by translating it. Like it literally just says blip, bleep, bloop.
Blip, bleep, bloop, bloop, bloop.
So you think I'm wrong?
I think you're 100% wrong, because up until this point, think about all the sci-fi movies you've ever seen.
Yeah.
And it's impossible to ever care about truly the alien characters in the movie. And obviously they are robots and droids and mechanical, but I would consider them an alien character for the fact that they're not human. And this movie starts by challenging those presuppositions and giving you characters to fall in love with because they are endearing, they're funny, they have plights that you want to see them get out of. Everything about them works incredibly well to draw you into the plot of the movie that you don't need humans to do.
I think that Lucas is really hedging his bets on the reveal of who Obi-Wan is and who Princess Leia is. And that revelation doesn't come until like 45, 50 minutes into the movie. When we've found out who Luke is, and, we've seen him with his Uncle Owen. I'll get to that in a minute. But Luke is now with Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan Kenobi is, Princess Leia records this distress signal into R2-D2 that they have to go find Obi-Wan. They finally find him. We don't know anything about Obi-Wan, right? We don't know anything. We don't even really know anything about Vader. We know Vader's a bad guy because he's dressed in black and he has a funny voice, right?
Yeah.
Princess Leia, we kind of know who she is because they call her a princess and she starts talking about the Senate. But we don't know anything. We don't have enough information to go on for 45 whole minutes. And I feel like as soon as that info comes out and the real story emerges and, Luke tries to go back to his Uncle Owen and we find out what happened to him. As soon as they get off that rock and they start heading for space and they go to Mos Eisley, the movie starts. And once it takes off, it's a good movie. But it takes so freaking long for this movie to get going, Brad.
If you haven't drank water for, 24 hours, are you going to be desperate for more?
Yes. What are you trying? What are you saying?
You don't need an overload of information to like a movie. The entire purpose of not having a ton of information at the start is so that as every little detail comes out, you're grabbing onto it and you're trying to put this puzzle together of what's going on. By not giving you all of the information and laying it out to you as if we're children who need it laid out.
Don't be that guy.
It offers you the opportunity to build the picture on your own, and it makes you grab onto every layer of information that you get.
Yes, I understand that, Brad. But what I'm saying is...
But you literally just said you don't like that.
I don't like it.
Why not?
Because it takes too long. I'm not saying that I needed Lucas to dump the whole story in the first scene. What I'm saying is... He could have trimmed that 45 minutes, and especially the 25 minutes of them wandering around the desert together. If you had taken 5-10 minutes out of that whole thing, and even gotten me to Luke quicker, because we find this farm boy, essentially, Luke, living with his Uncle Owen and his aunt... Beru. Thank you. Once we get to Luke, we know who our hero is going to be. He's this boyish, he's a kid with ambition, but he wants to get off this rock.
Charm.
Absolutely. Yeah. Get me to Luke 10 minutes quicker, and it's a better movie.
I don't think it takes that long to get to Luke.
I'm telling you, man, it's at least 25 minutes into the movie.
And that's not that long of a time.
I don't know. With no human character to latch myself onto, and no character who's giving me information about why I should care, it's hard to buy in at the beginning for me.
Oh, man. For me, Leia does that at the start.
But you don't know who she is.
You don't need to know who she is.
How do we know that? How do we know that she's even the good guy? How do we know that we're supposed to be rooting for her?
Oh, you very obviously.
Well, they tell you because she's wearing white and he's wearing black, right? He's the bad guy.
Yeah.
But why should I care?
Because she is a princess who is in plight.
You just like her because she's pretty, and you know
it. No, and that's the thing about Leia is that especially in the time that the 1970s and 60s and leading up to that era was, she is a fighter princess.
Oh, I love.
She's a warrior.
We will get into this. Leia gets the short shrift in this movie.
Yeah,
they need to have more Leia, and they underdevelop her character, and it bothers me. She's so much better in Empire. We're not even going to talk about because we're saying no sequels. But what I'm saying is this movie takes so long to get going, Brad, that when we finally get introduced to the main characters of the movie, aside from Luke and Obi-Wan, when Leia finally comes into the picture, the movie's like 2/3 of the way done, and there's never a break in the action after Leia comes in, which is good from a storytelling standpoint, but it leaves Leia never getting developed. You never really learn anything about Leia in this movie. You don't. I mean, she's been taken prisoner.
But you know enough to care about her.
I'm not saying I don't care. I loved Leia.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is she needed more development. She did. I mean, at the end of the movie where she's giving them their medals, it's the first time you see her acting as princess, really. But we haven't seen her do anything except run away from laser beams the whole movie. So they gave Luke his great scene of looking at the twin moons or twin suns or whatever it is. They give Han his great scene in Mos Eisley with Han shot first. All of these characters are set up except Leia. And that bothers me because Leia might be the best character in the whole thing.
I don't know if I agree with that at all. I think you get the information you need to understand why she does the things that she does.
But they don't take a break from the action to develop. What I'm saying is You remember like when Luke and Han and they all break onto the Death Star for the first time, and they're kind of like sitting around the control room, and Han has his thing about like, well, I'm not sticking my neck out for anybody kind of a thing. It's a break from the action where Han gets dialogue that tells you who Han is. Leia doesn't get that. Like, Leia serves the plot and she's not a fully fleshed out human being. You know I'm right on this. Give me 1 point. Come on.
I will concede 0 points.
The plans you refer to will soon be back in our hands.
Any attack made by the rebels against this station would be a useless gesture, no matter what technical data they've obtained. This station is now the ultimate power in the universe. I suggest we use it.
Don't be too proud of this technological terror you've constructed. The ability to destroy a planet is insignificant next to the power of the Force.
Don't try to frighten us with your sorcerer's ways, Lord Vader. Your sad devotion to that ancient religion has not helped you conjure up the stolen data tapes, or given you clairvoyance enough to find the rebels' hidden fort.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
Enough of this. Vader, release him.
As you wish.
You've got me combative.
We're jumping all over the place. So,
Yes.
okay. So, 25 minutes wandering around the desert is awful.
Right.
We meet Luke. Luke's living with Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru.
Right.
They happen to buy these droids with a distress signal. And they're talking about Ben Kenobi. And he's, I wonder if that's old Obi-Wan Kenobi. And then we get Sir Alec Guinness coming in the film.
Other way around. I wonder if that's old Ben Kenobi.
That's what I said, isn't it?
No, you...
Oh, vice versa. All right.
Yeah.
So then we get Alec Guinness coming in the movie as Obi-Wan Kenobi. And I love Alec Guinness in this movie because he's halfway invested and he's halfway like, this movie's going to suck.
Oh.
And I need a paycheck.
Yeah, 100%. But it worked for
My favorite character in the whole movie is Alec Guinness's hair, which is always in a state of disarray. He's like running around and it's all over the place. Can I tell you, if I had to pick one thing I hate most about this movie?
Okay.
The sand people.
Really?
Yeah, because they don't serve any purpose to the movie. Like, it's just kind of an extra scene that we don't need of, like, R2-D2 getting in danger. And then you've got Obi-Wan, like, stumbling in, going, woo, scaring them off.
Yeah.
It's just, like, it was another thing that slowed down the development of the movie to me.
That's interesting.
Like, even if we had Obi-Wan and Luke saying, yeah, there's lots of sand people out there, they're dangerous, and never seeing them, we would still know it's dangerous. We didn't have to have a 5-minute sequence of them, getting beaten up by these sand people.
I could give you that.
But
then you wouldn't get one of the most famous, like...
It's so bad.
Without that, you don't have a movie.
The first 25 minutes of this movie, this is the note I took. The first 25 minutes are laughably bad. That's what I wrote.
Oh.
And again, the rest of the movie is very good. But it's like, it gets off to a rocky start.
Now, here's a question for you.
Yeah.
And this is a genuine question. Would you include the opening crawl and musical theme in that first 25 minutes?
Well, I mean, they're actually in the first 25 minutes, so sure.
But that's what I'm saying. Because to me, that is one of the best opening scenes of any movie.
You talked about how George Lucas doesn't want to treat us like children, but the opening crawl of that movie is literally like a children's book.
It sets the stage.
It sets the stage, but it sets the stage in like a really like pandering, the evil galactic empire led by the evil Darth Vader goes and is trying to get the plans from the good Princess Leia. It's so bad. The opening crawl is bad. John Williams can never be bad. Okay. I will never say the theme music is bad.
If you said a bad word about John Williams,
absolutely
the
not.
podcast would be over. Period. I would quit, walk out. John Williams is a true gem.
He's a national treasure.
He is.
He is what Nicolas Cage was hunting for.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say the first 25 minutes are
brilliant,
super bad, and I want to hear your rebuttal.
I've already said my rebuttal.
Oh, cool.
The first 25 minutes are essential to the movie because it sets up what they're fighting against. The power of the Empire with the overwhelming, the ship as it comes. You think the first ship is really big and then you see the other one. You see the overwhelming power of Darth Vader in his tenacity and the way that he will do whatever it takes to get what he wants. You see the innovation of the droids and how they are going to go about succeeding in their plans no matter what. You meet Luke, and you're talking about before you meet Luke, or up to the point where they meet Obi-Wan?
Up to the point, yeah, up to the point where they introduce Luke, pretty much.
Okay.
I would even include that first scene with like Uncle Owen where they're eating lunch and drinking milk and stuff.
That part's kind of awkward.
It is.
It's kind of like, all right, we got
They're bad actors.
blue milk now.
Uncle Owen's bad.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with you there.
And Aunt Beru, where she's like awkwardly smiling when they're talking about how like he's just like his dad.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Yeah. And here's the thing. If you haven't picked up on it already, I'm a Star Wars fanboy. I absolutely love the Star Wars universe. And that doesn't mean that I don't recognize that there's certain parts of the movie that aren't great. Aunt Beru and Uncle Owen, I think they're important to the movie, but it wasn't great acting.
Yeah.
And probably not even great writing. But they're still important and a part of the movie lore and history. And I love them for that.
Okay, so moving on in the plot of this movie.
Okay.
Obi-Wan comes in and does his old guy thing.
Yeah.
They find out that
the kite dragon and all that.
They find out that Princess Leia is in distress on the Death
Obi-Wan
Star.
Kenobi. You're my only hope.
They have to go rescue her.
Right.
And Luke Skywalker is like, "Hey, I'm ready to get off this planet. Let me come with you." Obi-Wan says, "No, go home and be a farm boy." And then he realizes, "Oh no, Darth Vader's henchmen, the stormtroopers, are going to be looking for these droids that I bought. I should get home and protect my family." And then he gets home and his family is just straight dead.
Yeah.
Which is emotionally affecting, except for the fact that, like, I was kind of surprised at how ruthless George Lucas. You just see like these smoldering corpses of poor Uncle Owen.
Not even corpses. It's just skeletons.
It's like a cle up of like their scalding hot flesh ripping off their skeleton. It's bad, dude. Like, dang, George, you didn't have to show all that.
He does kind of shove it down your throat a little bit.
And then Luke's just kind of like, meh. And then he just goes back to Obi-Wan, and Obi-Wan's like, "Yeah, it happens to the best of us." Like he gets off his little cruiser. He's just
first off, Luke does not have a meh reaction.
Luke goes, "There's nothing left for me here now." And that's his whole reaction. He tells Obi-Wan, "There's nothing for me here. Guess I'll go with you now." And Obi-Wan's like, "All right, let's go."
Mos Eisley is the most wretched hive of scum and
just
villainy.
go to the bar.
I mean, if you found your aunt and uncle, wouldn't you probably go to the bar?
I guess, but he's just kind of like, there's not even like a burial scene. He just sees them like on fire, and then he's just like, "Well, screw it," and he just leaves, and he leaves them to rot on the ground. What a terrible nephew!
I don't think that you are giving Mark Hamill justice.
I will say Mark Hamill is great in this movie. He does the boyish charm thing perfectly. I'm just saying,
he does do the grieving nephew very well.
George Lucas does not write grief very well.
Yeah, I did not take that scene in that way at all. I thought he was very emotionally moved by it, and that's why he bought into it. Because initially, it feels like he's going to buy into it because Princess Leia is hot, and I also want to get off the planet, so why not go chase after this girl? When Owen and Beru die, it gives that emotional punch to it that gives him the reason to continue on the journey.
I don't disagree with that. I'm just saying it would have been nice to see him actually grieve instead of just like immediately like leave and then be like, "What's up, Obi-Wan?"
So you wanted like him dragging his dead father onto the ship and then and then like the fire funeral at the end of Return.
No.
Something like that.
I'm just saying there's a couple times that happens in this movie. The other time, obviously this is jumping ahead, but when we finally see the power of the Death Star that Darth Vader has had constructed, and they blow up Alderaan, Princess Leia's home, her home planet. It's not just like a planet. It's not like if they blew up Idaho. It would be like if they blew up Ohio, the state that you and I know and love. And she watches it, and it's like in a second, it's gone.
Yeah.
Alderaan's gone. And she's just like, "No. Don't you dare do that. Everyone you ever knew and loved is dead." And she doesn't even cry. She doesn't grieve in any way. They just cut away from it and go to the next scene. We just watched billions get massacred. They don't pause for a second.
I mean, if anything, the best reaction to that is when when they get back to Ben and he's like, and they're in the field and he goes, "I just feel like a million souls cried out all at once."
Yeah.
That was emotionally wrenching.
Great.
Yeah.
I felt a disturbance in the
Yeah.
Force.
Yeah.
But you know who wasn't disturbed? Princess Leia.
Well, she's Force sensitive. She doesn't have a full connection yet.
Right.
You'll learn that later in the books if you start reading afterwards.
Shut up, Brad. All right, so I'm already upset about this movie, and I think that it's time for us to drink some whiskey. So what do you say we bust open this Old Granddad and give it a try?
No, screw you. I hate you. You're the worst.
What did I do?
Everything. You don't like Star Wars.
I do like Star Wars.
Do you, though?
Let's find out.
All right, so today we're looking at Old Granddad. It is a cheap bottle of whiskey.
It really is. It's owned by the Jim Beam Company now. It was started back in the 1800s by, guess who? Basil Hayden Sr.
Oh, Basil Hayden sucks.
This is Basil Hayden's namesake whiskey, Old Granddad. Once it was bought by Jim Beam, they started making different varieties of it. There's a bottled in bond version. There's a barrel proof version. We just got the 80 proof. But once they owned the Basil Hayden's name, they started to make Basil Hayden's bourbon, which if it is in any way affiliated with Basil Hayden's, I'm already worried about how this is going to taste because neither one of us liked Basil Hayden's.
Yeah, so we've already poured this.
What are you picking up on the nose, Brad?
Nothing.
Nothing at all?
Yeah, I'm already really struggling with this.
Oh, yeah, that doesn't smell... It doesn't smell very matured, I will say that. It says it's a straight bourbon whiskey, which means it has to be aged for 2 years. It just kind of smells like alcohol and some wood, and that's about it.
Yeah, I'm really struggling to pick up any major flavors from like a flavor wheel on here. I mean, you can tell that it's a bourbon. It has a little bit of sweetness, but not anything particular that I'm picking up. Mm-hmm. So, what would you give it on the nose?
Pretty low on the nose, Brad. I mean, maybe a 4,
Okay,
a 3 or a 4.
I gave it a 3.
It does not smell good.
Yeah. Yeah, and once again, if you like the smell of whiskey, it's not going to kill you or anything, but it doesn't smell great.
Let's take a sip.
Ugh.
It's bitter. It's not sweet.
Oh, that's bad, bro.
I can't place it when I'm taking a sip of it and it's about to my mouth and I breathe in those fumes. There's something there. It's like a piney, almost like a pine tar type.
I'm going to use the word sour. It kind of leaves a sour taste in my mouth.
It says it's a high rye mash bill, meaning that the second, to be bourbon, it has to be 51% corn, but the second most used grain would be rye. I suppose that some of what we're smelling and some of that sort of more bitter, spicy taste would be the rye in it. But we've had ryes before on the podcast.
That we enjoyed.
Yeah. And this does not fit the bill on that. On the taste, it is not sweet. I will say that it's pretty consistent in its spice and its more bitter notes, but I don't enjoy that.
At all.
I would probably max out on the taste on this one at a 5.
I'm going to give it a 1.
Oh, it's that bad to you?
This is not good.
Wow.
Bourbon.
All right, on the finish, Brad, what do you get on the finish?
Like I said, it kind of has a sour finish for me. This tastes sour to me on the finish.
It's just bitter. There's just no sweetness to it. And it finishes the way you would expect something like that to finish. It's just hanging in my chest.
Yeah.
It's leaving an unpleasant taste in my mouth. I would give this a 2 on the finish.
Yeah, I'm going to give it a 1.
All right.
The finish is just...
Overall balance?
Once again, it's not good all around, so is it balanced? Yeah, 10 out of 10. I'll go ahead and give it a 3 on balance.
Yeah.
It does what it does, but that's not a good thing, so I'm not going to give it a good score.
I don't think anything stands out in a bad way between the nose, the taste, and the finish, so I think I'd give it like a 6 on the balance.
Yeah.
All right, so the last category for us then would be...
Value.
Yeah.
So the thing for me is, I could see this being a decent mixer. And I believe this bottle for a 5th was like $12.99.
Okay.
So I would actually say, for what you are paying,
Yeah.
if you're looking for a mixer, with the qualifier, if you're looking for a mixer that's cheap, I would give it about a 7 on value.
I mean, yeah, it's a high rye bourbon, so you could use it if you wanted to in place of a rye. I mean, you could make Manhattans with this. You could make whatever you wanted to with this, and it would just taste like alcohol and some sort of bitter concoction.
Right.
For $12.99, though, we've had much, much better. I mean, that Heaven Hill, is the best value I've ever had in my life, and that was $9.
Right.
So even at the price point, I don't think this is a good value. I would give it maybe a 4 on the value.
Yeah.
Which I think puts me out to a total of 21 out of 50.
It does.
Which I even, thinking about it now, that seems too high for this, because we did Crown Royal last episode, and that seemed way better than this at a 25.
Yeah, I mean, I came out to an 18 out of 50.
Yeah.
So, or sorry, a 15 out of 50.
Wow.
So would you say that's probably more of what you were thinking?
Yeah, I'd split the difference probably, and I'm glad that we do. You know, we're talking about what, like an 18 out of 50.
Right.
So like a 36% out of 100. This is not good, you guys.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate because every time we try a whiskey, I want to be positive about it. And it's the same with movies. I want to enjoy movies. We don't partake in movies and whiskey to be angry and bitter about it.
No, not at all.
So it's not like we give this a gleeful 15 or 18 out of 50. It's just the reality of what it is.
Yeah. So that's been Old Granddad.
Yeah. So now we can move from one of the worst bourbons of all time to one of the greatest movies of all time.
A movie that we both enjoy, believe it or not.
Do you though, Bob?
I do. Let's get back into talking about Star Wars. So that was Old Granddad, high rye bourbon.
Old wah wah.
High rye, low quality. You know, we've been bickering about Star Wars back and forth, and we will continue to do so because our relationship is just bickering.
Yeah.
But
one of the things, though, with Star Wars is that, like I said at the very start, it's a magical film. You know what I mean? Just the way it draws you into it. And one of the reasons it's so magical for a lot of people is, like, the first time they saw it was at a specific time of their life or it hit them in a certain way. And so I want to talk a little bit about my first time seeing the movie Star Wars. But before, like, do you remember the first time you saw Star Wars?
I can't say that I do. I watched it when I was a kid. You know, I was maybe 9 or 10. We got it from the video store. You know, it was, even then I remember it being like a good movie, but it didn't have the life-changing effect that it had on some people.
Yeah.
So what was your experience, Brad?
So it's 1995. I am 4, maybe 5 years old at this point. And we were at a party with some friends. You know, it was like a church party of some sort. We're at our friend's house. And being that it's the 90s, the guy who owned the house had just gotten a projector in his basement. Do you remember when those like became a big thing?
Oh, yeah. I didn't even realize it was that early on. That was when everyone was still getting big screen TVs that were like, you know,
right.
They weighed a ton.
And so this guy had just gotten a projector in his basement, and it took up the entire wall. Like, he had painted the entire wall white, and pretty much the entire wall was this projector. And so he's obviously trying to show it off to his friends, and we all go into the basement. And sure enough, what do we watch other than Star Wars? And I still have this vivid memory of just being entranced by the music and the space battle. And I remember the moment beyond anything else where I was hooked was when the stormtroopers cleared the hallway. They have the battle with the rebels on the ship at the very start, and Darth Vader walks onto the screen. And I just about lost it. And I have been hooked to Star Wars ever since. There's something so intimidating and scary and powerful about the character of Darth Vader that he just drove that movie forward, and I have never looked back. I have been addicted to the Star Wars universe ever since.
So I'll say a couple things, and I don't want to take away from your experience because I wish I had that experience with Star Wars. But going back and watching it again, too, we've already talked about this a little bit. I don't know how good of a director George Lucas is. I really liked American Graffiti, the movie he made before this. I think it's great. But even watching Darth Vader's entrance into the film, you can tell that it's going to be an important character in the movie. You know, I don't think anyone at the point that they're making it knew this was going to be an iconic character in film history, but even the way that they frame him is not done. Like, when you get into Empire and you see Irving Kershner directing a film, he portrays Darth Vader in such a more powerful, menacing way. And George Lucas, the way he films Vader, there's so many other people in the shot that Vader just kind of seems like this weird, out of place guy sometimes. It's just like looking around, not knowing what's going on. And for me, it's all about the way that he films it. It's about the camera work, and Darth Vader lost some of his menace to me in the early scenes of this movie. Now, I think he gets it back in those later scenes where he's like force choking people. But for his big entrance, I feel like there was something left to be desired there.
Man, I feel like, I think that Lucas's use of color especially helps depict the dominance and induces fear of Vader when he enters the scene, that everything is a stark white, and he is literally sucking away the light with the darkness of his outfit, his costume, his character, his presence.
Yeah.
Just sucks away all the goodness around it, and he's just intimidating. I loved his entrance into the Star Wars universe.
Like Darth Vader as a character.
Yeah.
I just didn't think that first scene was that intimidating. And I think that the design of the Death Star really helps. Because, this movie didn't have the world's biggest budget, obviously. But the way that they portray the inside of the Death Star as this really sleek, modern, sparse, minimal type atmosphere, it really works in favor of the film. And the fact that the walls in the Death Star are so dark, it really lends everything that happens inside that ship a sense of menace and dread. And you really get the sense that you're finally like on Vader's turf, like you're in his domain now.
Yeah.
And I think that setting helps the character more than some of the other settings he was in.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
So let's talk a little bit about our boy Han Solo.
Ooh.
Han shows up. Again, I don't know that Lucas always nails the entrances of these characters. Because if you think about the very first time Han Solo wanders into the movie, you don't actually watch him approach. They just cut to him sitting down in a booth, and he's like, "Hey, I'm Han Solo." You're like, who's this guy? like literally, he's like, "I'm Captain of the Millennium Falcon." And I love how he says Falcon too.
Yeah.
But you don't really know anything about this guy, and he's just here. And I wish that they had given him a cool Han being Han scene.
Like when he shoots Greedo. And granted, that's not the opening thing you see with him,
Right.
but it is a pretty introductory.
Yeah, that's fair. And part of the problem that I really had with it, and I tried to avoid it at all costs, I could not find the original 77 version of this movie. I had to watch the stupid special edition from 97 with the crappy CGI Jabba the Hutt inserted from a deleted scene that's not even in the 77 version. And so I'm trying to go on my memory of how does Han enter the movie, forgetting that he does the Greedo thing before he meets Luke and Obi-Wan.
Yeah. Well, actually, no, he doesn't meet them before.
Good. So I'm right.
Yeah, no, you're right. He meets Luke and Obi-Wan, and then when he gets up to leave with them,
that's when Greedo comes in.
Greedo forces him to sit down.
Yes.
Yeah.
And again, Han Solo is super cool.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, we will never make a more obvious statement on this podcast than Han Solo is cool.
Yeah, Han Solo is one of the best characters that's been created in the film universe.
Yeah.
And I think that's another reason why Star Wars is so impactful. When you think about one of the coolest rogue types, the kind of like cool, handsome, charming rogue, Han Solo is the mold.
Yeah.
And Darth Vader, I wouldn't say is the mold for a villain, but he is probably up there in a top 2 or 3 most iconic film villains of all time.
Absolutely.
And so when you look at a movie that has 2 of the definitions of a character type, I mean, it just nailed it.
I do think that I love the fact that Han stays a supporting character in this film. As the movies go on, and again, we're not commenting on how valid the other things are, but Han becomes more and more of a big character because he's so successful. But in this movie, Han is there to serve Han's role.
Yeah.
And Han is there to be, stubborn and to not get along with Luke, and then to eventually come around to Luke's way of thinking.
Yeah.
And he stays that way through the movie. He doesn't become the star of the film. It's always Luke's story. Mm-hmm. And I love that they keep the priorities right with how they introduce these characters into things.
Oh, so George Lucas did something good.
Absolutely.
Oh, you're actually giving him props for something.
This movie is a success, and we all know it.
Yeah.
What's your take on Chewbacca?
I think he's a lovable sidekick.
Sure.
That he doesn't advance the plot in any specific way, but I think he's the R2-D2 for Han Solo.
Yeah.
Like R2-D2 is for C-3PO.
Well, and watching it again this time, we all know Chewbacca, and we all love Chewbacca. But if you want to talk about a character that gets no development, like, he's literally just there.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, I'm Han Solo. This is Chewbacca. He's going to be tagging along.
He's my co-pilot.
He doesn't do anything the whole movie. I mean, he shoots some guys and stuff, but
Yeah.
like, you never find out anything about him.
But I think maybe you're looking for too much, and this might be my frustration with most of your complaints with the movie, is I feel like you're looking for too much out of the movie. Like you're trying to ask for things that don't need to be there.
Oh, I'm not saying it needs to be there. I'm just saying, like, when you talk to a Star Wars fanatic,
Yeah.
they are blind to any possible flaws in this film.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to nitpick either. I'm just saying I can't love Chewbacca as much as I love Luke.
Yeah.
Because I don't know anything about Chewbacca.
But is that a flaw? Because that's essentially what you're saying, is it's a flaw that you don't know Chewbacca. And a Star Wars fan who wouldn't see that as a flaw is saying, well, no, it's not a flaw.
Well, that's true. I don't find that it's a flaw with the writing or the flaw with the movie. I find a flaw, and this is arguing outside the bounds of the movie a little
Right.
bit. I find flaws with the Star Wars fandom in general.
Yeah.
And it's because they've taken characters that were never supposed to be anything more than minor characters. They developed them into characters that they treat like are the greatest thing ever written. Boba Fett was never supposed to be Boba Fett. Like, he's just a guy that's chasing them down in Empire, and then he dies like a punk in Revenge or Return of the Jedi, and that's it. But now people love Boba Fett so much that there's a whole mythology developed. They're making a TV show about him. Like, Chewbacca should just be Chewbacca, and we should leave it alone. And you're right. It's not fair for me to criticize George Lucas because he never wrote Chewbacca to have this huge mythology developed around him. But what we've done with this movie, because we're so obsessed with Star Wars, is people ask us to love characters that fundamentally we're not there to be beloved. We're supposed to love Luke. We're supposed to love Leia and Han Solo. We're supposed to hate Darth Vader, and that's it.
And I think that's the reason why you, as just a film person, struggle with Star Wars, is because when you talk about Star Wars, you're not just talking about the movies.
Right.
You're talking about the entire universe that has been created beyond Star Wars. And the thing is, when you look at a universe like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, people will talk about that. And sure, they can talk about the comics, but let's be really honest. How many people who are huge fanboys of the Marvel Cinematic Universe have actually delved deeply into all the comic books for the Incredible Hulk and Spider-Man, Iron Man, Captain America? They really haven't.
Well, and that's the thing, like, off air, we've talked about both of our opinions of Endgame, and I don't even want to get into Endgame, especially not spoilers or anything. But I keep reading comments from people on Endgame that are like, you don't understand. My whole life has led up to this moment, and I've watched 22 movies and blah, 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 blah. Yeah, but does that make it a good movie? Just because you liked these characters your whole life, you have to evaluate the movie on what the movie does.
Yeah. And so the thing that I like about Star Wars more than the Marvel Cinematic Universe is that the Marvel Cinematic Universe is working from source material.
Yeah.
Whereas Star Wars is not.
Right.
And I think that is why Star Wars is so magical, is because it created a minimalistic universe from the film that fans were desperate to fill in the holes for.
Right.
And I think that's why Star Wars has had such an enduring quality, and I think it's why Disney is screwing up Star Wars, is because they're trying to turn it into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Whereas there's already a universe that's been established for Star Wars that they would have been better to draw upon than to try and create their own thing, which is essentially what the Marvel Cinematic Universe did. They had all that source material and they used that to morph into their own thing. And now with the Star Wars, what Disney is doing just isn't healthy. And so I think that for you looking at the movie and saying, just let the movie be what it is.
Yeah.
Let Chewie be what it is. I think that is a healthy way to look at the movie, but I think it also takes away from the passion that people have so deeply for the movies that they created on their own.
Well, and that's where my problem comes in, is that we have made this movie, forced it to be more than it is.
Forced?
Hey, we've forced it to be more than it is, because what we've both been arguing essentially is it's a minimalistic universe that George Lucas set up just enough for us to love it.
Yeah.
And then the fans loved it so much that they developed their own, fan servicey, fan fiction universe
literally
out of
called
it.
the expanded universe.
The problem I have is that now we look back at Star Wars with these 40 plus years of development of mythology, and we act as if that original movie was that fleshed out, and it wasn't.
Yeah.
And it wasn't meant to be. But we also, just like we can't undersell what it is, we can't oversell what the fanatics want it to be.
Yeah. I think also, though, that I look back as a fanboy who grew up reading all the Star Wars novels, the X-Wing Squadron, the Jedi Academy trilogy, just all these things. I could literally do a podcast for 7 hours straight talking about Star Wars stuff I know.
Yeah.
I think that enhances my viewing of Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. Because for me, I have all of that background knowledge.
But if you need that to enhance it, then is it a great movie?
I don't need it to enhance it. I've loved that movie since the first time I saw it.
We're going to get back into bickering if we don't give this movie a score. So I think what we should do is just give it our scores, let our arguments rest for what they are, and call it a day.
Yeah.
Because Old Granddad was bad, and I want to get away from it.
Yeah.
All right. So, Brad, what would you give this movie?
How about you score it first?
I would give Star Wars a 7 out of 10. I think that Empire is as perfect as this franchise will ever get. Brad and I have argued about The Last Jedi because I enjoyed The Last Jedi and he didn't. Empire, I'd give like a 9.5, 10 out of 10. I think that the first Star Wars...
I love that you just throw in there that reference about The Last Jedi.
And move on, right? Just to open another can of worms. But I think that Star Wars is a 7.
I am going to give Star Wars a 9.5 out of 10.
Okay.
Empire is a 10 out of 10. Star Wars is a 9.5 out of 10.
So that's where we're at.
It's such a good movie.
It's a good movie. Look, and like I said, once they get off of... What's Luke's home planet?
Tatooine.
That's what I thought. Once they get off of Tatooine, like, the movie takes off from there.
I mean, technically speaking, he was born on the asteroid Apollos Massa.
Okay. All right.
So...
The movie takes off from there, and I think it takes a while to get going. I think that Lucas learned how to develop these characters more as he went, but that there's still some holes in this movie. And I'm okay giving it a 7. That doesn't mean it's a bad movie.
And I will say, full disclosure, I think that's a fair score.
Yeah.
I know that there's problems with this movie as a movie. I know that there are issues. But for me, the beauty and the magic of Star Wars overwhelms all those issues, and I would give it a 9.5 out of 10.
But we want to know what you think. Am I crazy? Am I too much of a snob? Let us know on Twitter or on Instagram at Film Whiskey with an E.
With an E.
With an E. Or on Facebook, Film and Whiskey Podcast. Or you
Give
can
us a call.
Yeah, you could call our call-in line. Leave us a voicemail. Berate me, please.
Please do. I desperately need somebody else to just rip into Bob about his take.
Yes, thank you. What's the number, Brad?
216-800-5923. Once again, that's 216-800-5923. Please give us a call. We love hearing from you guys.
And again, we are a newer podcast, so if this is something that you're enjoying, go over to iTunes, give us a 5-star review, make us more visible, share it with your family, share it with your friends. We have so enjoyed hanging out and talking about Star Wars.
For the Film and Whiskey Podcast, I am Brad G.
I'm Bob Book.
We'll see you next time.